Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the January 14th, 2014 edition of the Free Thought Forum, brought to you by the friendly folks at Pennsylvania Nonbelievers. We are a 501c3 non-profit organization dedicated to education, enlightenment, and to the separation of church and state issues. We also serve as a beacon of hope and camaraderie for those non-religious people out there that think they are alone in a religious world. They're not alone. There are millions of us out there. You say you don't know any atheists? Well, we beg to differ. You know far more than what you think. We're just hiding in the bushes. Tonight's program, we will be discussing the various events that will be happening in the upcoming year, 2014, the year ahead. Pennsylvania Nonbelievers, abbreviated PAN, has a lot planned, and as far as street fairs and other things. What's the word I'm looking for? What are we having in Pittsburgh?
Conference.
Yeah, senior moment there. Conference coming up, and the various other things pretty soon. We'll be discussing all that comes up. I am Doug Diggens, and this is...
I'm Jacob Zentichko.
Okay, and we're looking ahead at 2014. Before I hand some of the show over to Jacob, I would just like to mention just a couple of things. On Sunday, I kind of got up, went out to the kitchen to make myself a cup of coffee, and I just sort of flipped on the TV, and as it came on, the 700 Club was playing, and it was quite interesting because what is the name of those two, Betty and something. Anyway, there's a pair of them that have been married for like 50 years, and they were talking about volcanoes. Well, I'd just seen a couple of days beforehand a program on one of the other networks talking about volcanoes throughout the world and how various volcanoes could be, if they ever went off, they would be an extinction event. And one of the prime ones, one of the most dangerous ones, were in the Yellowstone caldera, Old Faithful, that goes up, and you think, well, it's just spitting water up in the air. But au contraire, there is billions and billions of tons of magma below there, hot magma, that is heating the water and causing the eruptions to go off. And it is widely accepted throughout all of science that if Yellowstone does erupt, it would be an extinction event, that a vast majority of the population of the earth, if not all of them, would perish as a result. And there's a number of other volcanoes throughout the world that are big enough to cause this eruption. Excuse me, and this end of the world. Excuse me. But what got me is that the 700 Club talks about the coming of the end of the world, and they're talking about Armageddon. Yet, both of them, excuse me, turned around to one another, and they looked and they said, Oh, yes, isn't it terrible about the volcano possibly going off? Oh, we pray that that doesn't happen. And I thought, how ludicrous that is, because that's all that most of the Christians are praying for, is the end of the world, so Jesus can come back. Oh, excuse me, kind of tickle in my throat. But anyway, for the rest of the show, or most of the show, I'm going to turn it over to Jacob. And what do you have to say there, Jacob?
Well, what I really just wanted to do, since this is our first episode of the 2014 year, I thought I'd just take a look ahead, what we've got to look forward to this year. And got quite a few things going on, both here in Pennsylvania and throughout the nation. Now, first of all, we have our elections coming up on March 1st, and the information for that is online. But the important thing to note about that is you need, for any non-members watching, if you want to participate in the elections, you must be a member by January 29th. So just to know, that deadline is coming up rather rapidly. Our biggest event of the year is our annual conference. This will be our third annual conference for the Pennsylvania. And it's really a good time. Last year we had it in Philadelphia, and I had a terrific time. I don't know, were you there? Did you make it? Oh, you were there? And it was really great.
I worked most of it.
Well, actually, I also did a lot of volunteer work for that event, and it was really fun to really get to meet a lot of people, including some of the national leaders. One thing I found really fun from last year's conference was it started off with the superstition party on Friday the 13th, and it's just funny to watch people's faces as they describe what we did. Things like you walk into the door on Friday the 13th, walk under a ladder with a black cat sitting there. It was just making fun of a lot of the superstitions that, even though you realize it's irrational to believe, you still sometimes you still feel a little unnerved doing it. But
that was kind of a presentation of Margaret Downey, wasn't it? Because that's her, triskaidekaphobia party. She said that in occasion.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. But I mean, we had a great list of speakers last year. A lot of big name faces. And actually, we also already have a few confirmed for this year that are going to be, very, very important speakers. First of all, this year it will be on Labor Day weekend, which is Friday, August 29th through the 31st. And returning from last year's conference will be Jerry DeWitt, a former pastor for many years, as well as sometimes I have to catch myself when I call him an ex-preacher, because he's still very much a preacher. He still gets very animated, but I think he's a very, very good speaker, very, very emotional. And what I also find kind of funny about him is they constantly schedule him for the Sunday morning of the conference just because he was a preacher, although I think he hates everybody for doing it. He's like, I want to sleep in on Sunday now. Well, actually, that was one of the jokes by Dan Barker when he was coming out on the Oprah Winfrey Show. One of the questions was, why did you leave? And he jokingly said, because I wanted to sleep in on Sunday. But I definitely look forward to meeting him. And I finished up his book, Hope After Faith, which I think is a pretty well-written book. On the subject of some other books, many of the speakers this year that we have confirmed are authors of some pretty important books. For example, we have Laura LeBeau, who is the author of the book The Devil in Dover, which is an inside look at the book at the trial Kitzmiller versus Dover, in which intelligent design was kicked out of the public school.
Hooray! Yeah.
Well, actually, I should say, kicked out under that label.
As creation science.
What's that?
As creation science.
Well, now first they called it creationism, that got kicked out, then they repackaged it as intelligent design, then that's what Kitzmiller versus Dover overturned, and now the new hot thing is academic freedom acts, which on the surface they don't seem objectionable because it sounds like they're just allowing kids to challenge their teachers, which should be something they should be allowed to do, but the way the bill is phrased, it's almost giving students the power to filibuster their classes.
Yeah, and that's to me, that's not a good idea.
Yeah, it's if you read the bill carefully, that's what it could lead to, which probably is you hate to draw those kinds of conclusions, but when you look at the people proposing them, it's all the same people who were promoting intelligent design and creationism. So I think you have to assume that that's what they
all have an agenda.
Yeah, that's what their agenda is. So I think that's among the other authors are Jerry Coney. I hope I'm saying that right. He's author of the book Why Evolution is True. And also Catherine Stewart, who wrote the book The Good News Club, which the Good News Club, personally, I think is one of those things that's not objectionable on the surface. It's as long as they stay within the rule book, which essentially they don't.
What is the rule book?
Well, with the Good News Club, for those of you who don't know, is actually it's an after-school sort of evangelical group. Mm-hmm. It's kind of an after-school biblical group for Christian students, which, for a student body activity, if they're doing it not during regular school hours and they're obeying the same rules that all the other groups have to, which is in terms of building usage, how much they have to pay, who they can include, and so on. So on and so forth. If they can stay within the rules that everybody else has to obey, then it's fine. But unfortunately, they tend to overstep them.
Like they have some sort of entitlement?
Yeah, like one time there was actually a Christian who actually objected to this group because they started throwing Bibles through the windows of buses, and actually injured some students.
What do you mean? I mean, are you not maliciously? You're saying is that they threw them through the windows so they could read them? Yeah,
it's not malicious. I don't doubt their intentions, but they're essentially proselytizing during school hours.
Yeah.
Which is crossing the line. I mean, the second this class is let out, then the rules change, Then it's kind of everybody's time,
But wait a minute here. They're on their way to a class. They're not yet at the school. How are they on on school time?
That's an interesting technicality, I think, but I think you could argue it starts from the second they get on the bus to the second the buses leave the school.
Because the people are paying for the buses to transport them to school.
That is true. That is true. That's a good point, where it's government dollars pay for the buses and the transportation.
So therefore, until they actually leave school, get on the buses, and get off at their particular bus stop,
right,
the taxpayers are really all the taxpayers,
right,
of every religious denomination and everything are paying. Yeah, probably praying too. Are paying for their education. Therefore, it is on
right,
school time.
Right, and that's really what we need to get across, is we're not objecting to this group actually existing. We realize if people want to use the school for extracurricular activities, if it brings more money into the school, sure. But and I think that's really what this book was aimed at, to show that they are kind of crossing some lines, and some boundaries need to be respected. Now, the reason I bring these books up, these authors up, is mostly because I think it's would be a good reading list for this summer. If you plan to go to the conference, I think it would be great to kind of look at these people's works, and maybe have a discussion. I know for last year's conference, I picked up a couple of books and got some autographs. Like I got Seth Andrews and his book autographed, and so is Jerry DeWitt.
Well, Laurie LeBeau is also an interesting person to talk to. She's very, very well read, and when she wrote her book, The Devil in Dover, she researched it down to the finest point. She just didn't sort of form an opinion and then start writing willy-nilly. She just laid everything out, and it just made perfect sense of how these people that were on the school board were really, in my opinion, not playing with a full deck.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always nice when you get some really well-researched books, because I know there are times I've picked up a few books and been looked through it, and I'm like, why are everybody raving about this? I know that isn't true, that isn't true. There's a lot of mistakes in it, or actually that's a topic I want to come back to later when I talk about something later.
Okay, write a note to yourself that you come back, put a big tick mark, so we don't forget it. Yeah,
but it is an important topic. I definitely want to come back to that. But another, back to these on the topic, sorry about that little tangent on books, but I think it's important to kind of get an idea of what these authors are. And another pretty big speaker is going to be Anna Laura Gaylor of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. One of the largest, when the Freedom from Religion Foundation is one of the largest watchdog groups in the country.
Yeah, and I really respect all the work that they really do, because people hear, oh yeah, freedom from religion, what kind of anti-religious nut are they? Well, what they're doing is that they're protecting your constitutional rights.
Right, and that's the thing. They're not.
Excuse me.
Don't confuse them. Like, really. There's two major national groups. You have American Atheist and the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And I think the American Atheist is the one that is a little bit more confrontational. Talk more about setting up the billboards. Really engaging in debates. Which really has its it does have its place. It has its place, but the Freedom from Religion Foundation is purely about preserving the separation of church and state. In fact, they won, just late last year, they won a major lawsuit to overturn the housing allowances that the clergy were receiving from the government. It was a law passed in the 1950s where they were allowed to take in a housing allowance which was tax-free. So essentially it was tax-free income, which no other nonprofit organization can receive that. And we would like to. Actually, Dan Barker, the head of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, specifically said he doesn't. Actually, they gave him a housing allowance in order to give them standing to sue, because he's not allowed to take it. And when you file a lawsuit against the federal government, you have to have standing as a damaged party. But they actually gave, even if they offered Dan Barker housing allowance under the law, he'd probably still refuse it, because that's not his objective. His objective is, he thinks everybody should pay their taxes. And I think it's unfair to say that we'd like that housing allowance. I don't think I'd want. Maybe you could say, yeah, I'd like tax-free income, but I think. I think in terms of practicality, you're not. The country can't survive without some sort of tax. Right. But I mean, it was. And one thing that happened with this bill why this lawsuit was so important was at one point multi-million-dollar pastor Rick Warren actually had his entire income declared housing allowance. So we're talking millions of dollars of tax-free income. Now, they later modified it to try to keep it within reason, but even still, the bill was so... The way they defined clergy in the bill was so loosely defined. I mean, it literally was defined as anyone who spreads the message of Jesus. Which,
of Jesus?
I think that's how it was phrased. Because literally anyone down to even like Catholic school basketball coaches, I think the entire 700 Club staff down to the janitors have housing allowances. So it's just a lot of tax-free income for people who really don't deserve it.
If anyone out there can send me an application for the 700 Club here for employment, please, do so, and maybe I can get in on this windfall.
Well, what's even worse about it is they get the housing allowance in cash, and then they sometimes use that to pay for mortgages, and mortgage interest you can also deduct from your income taxes. So they were also double dipping on it.
What a tangled web we weave, huh?
Yeah, that's why the Freedom from Religion Foundation is so important, to attack things like that going on. And really, it's not just Christianity that takes advantage of this. I can't even go into what the Mormons get away with. If they just tax the non-church aspects of the businesses, they essentially have a lot of businesses hidden behind their church. So it's really I don't want to just single out Christians here, because there's a lot of different organizations that are abusing this.
Well, I mean, just about every religious organization and sect and everything is taking advantage of the tax codes.
Right. And that's pretty much all Scientology was designed to do in the first place, it seems. So, and they have, I think, about 10 active lawsuits right now, several of them against the IRS. And they're usually, if there's a separation of church and state violation in your area, the first people to go to is the FFRF. Because even if they can't help you, they can help you, point you in the right direction. They're very experienced in dealing with these issues.
And they are not just a bunch of hayseeds, that put up a website. They are lawyers, judges that have got their law degrees, or at least a great number of them have. So you're not just getting off the cuff advice, you are getting viable legal advice.
And at times they'll also maybe write a letter for you to send to a local organization saying, hey, stop doing this. And they said, actually a fairly I forget what the exact, but it's a fairly respectable success rate of just sending a letter to stop a violation.
Yeah, there's a lot of otherwise the people that would otherwise take advantage like that, but they see that letter, and the FFRF does have standing. It has standing throughout the whole United States, as it were, and they're not a hayseed organization.
Yeah, I don't think standing is quite the right word, because sometimes you do need someone local complaining. Sometimes a local complaint is not required, but it certainly helps your case. So, and really, when you're talking about a national organization, they can't look at what every single person is doing in every single city. So they really rely on people to help them.
They have an air of authority.
That's a better word. That's a better word. But so we'll see Anna Laura Gaylor from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. I'm really excited to see what she has to say. And the list I just gave is not even a complete list. We don't have all the speakers confirmed yet. I'm hoping for maybe some other people, like maybe see David Silverman again, or...
Oh, he's good, isn't he? Isn't he great to hear him speak?
Yeah. But or even people like Seth Andrews, really great guy. I think he's represents a lot of heart in the organization. But yeah, there's even people like David Fitzgerald, who's really funny. He's dramatic. Where one of his famous speeches is where he's talking about biblical morality. But he doesn't go for the low-hanging stuff we all know. He goes for some things that you might not have picked up on, and he'll like explain, okay, this is actually a euphemism for something else, which throws it into an entirely different context, which really makes you wonder why it's even there. Like, or he'll even the one thing he loved doing was just reading out of the Song of Solomon. I mean, seriously, just reading out of it. It's that messed up. And well, what it seems is that book was actually left over from worship of another god in that culture.
But isn't that what most preachers and religious people do? Yeah. They take advantage of the low-hanging fruit,
right?
And because they know that everyone is sort of familiar with that, so they'll just sort of blurt the thing out. But then when you get something like someone like him that can actually turn it around and make them almost slap them in the face with their own.
But yeah, it's so I don't know what the entire list will be. Some of that was just speculation, but all of this is online, and hopefully we'll have more, a little bit more in the coming months. And I'd also recommend if you want to know more about these speakers, you could probably find them on YouTube somewhere. Many of the conferences throughout the nation will actually post their speeches online. A couple of big YouTube channels are, well, the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel posts all of the Oklahoma Free Thought conventions on his channel. Also, yes, that's a picture of Seth Andrews, the host of the Thinking Atheist. And he'll also, I think he's also posted a few of his other speeches around from different events. There's also Hambone Productions, which will post Skepticon videos. And also,
just talk about Skepticon for a second, because there's probably some people out there that don't know what Skepticon is. And don't forget, this is a call-in program, and the number is on the screen. And if you have a question, just call on in, and we'll answer your question online.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, Skepticon is I talked a little bit briefly. I talked it very briefly one of the last shows in December, but I didn't get a chance to really develop this. But Skepticon is one of the the largest free atheist conventions in the world. It's held every year, and I think I can't remember where it's held. Somewhere in the Midwest, but it's as I said, it's totally free, and they bring in a lot of different speakers, and they post, and they have some pretty quality videos on. They take a good documentation of it. So if you can't get out to one, the YouTube, you can either just like look on YouTube for Skepticon. The channel name is called Hambone Productions. So even if you don't get a chance to get out there, you can see what all the speeches are like, and they're a lot of fun to watch. They have a lot of good speakers there.
Yeah. Now keep in mind, this is not to be confused with Comic-Con. There are no people that are walking around with superhero garb on and capes and everything. Here, there's no superheroes there. This is an assault for every single thought or opinion that you could possibly have on a skeptical analysis of religion. It'll be there at Skepticon. And if you just want to just tread lightly on the surface of the water. You're going to find people there that will talk just as lightly to you. If you want to just jump in right up to your neck, there'll be people there that'll be glad to answer your questions and even tell you things that you didn't ask them questions about. So.
And
sorry, I interrupted.
I mean, there's all kinds of different things they talk about. Like this year, Richard Carrier gave a speech on philosophy. Well, the title of the speech was provocatively, "Is Philosophy Stupid?" And
okay.
And really, he goes through like a lot of the objections. Like, you know, Lawrence Krauss has said a lot of horrible things about philosophy, and a lot of people have been very critical of it. But
it depends on who's asking the question and who's answering it.
What's that?
It depends upon who's asking the question and who is answering it.
Right. Well, I mean, actually, as Richard Carrier points out in this speech, is, you know, the problem with philosophy is as a field of study is it's not really clearly like
there were no experts.
What's that?
There were no real experts there.
Well, I don't want to really say that. There's no real accountability, I should say. Like, you know, they do have they don't popularize it well. They don't like, they do have a sort of peer review process, but there's no clear guidelines or anything like that. Like,
yeah, but it's a restricted peer review that they have. I mean, it's not like science when you put out a paper for your peer review. I mean,
well, actually,
every scientist in the country wants to tear you apart.
Well, actually, you might want to watch the speech because he does address that. Because with philosophy is really a collection of things which actually does include science. You know, up until about the 1800s, science was still called natural philosophy for a long time. And actually, the term scientist didn't exist until the late 1800s. And what he said, I mean, there are problems with the scientific peer review process, but philosophy won't even admit they've got a problem. And actually, that was the subject of an early 2000 book mentioned in the speech, was talking about the philosophy in crisis as a field of study. The problem is far too often philosophers will try to make themselves as their separate field of study in itself, which to me makes as much sense as, say, mathematics trying to be its own field and not applicable to anything else. But I mean, he really goes into a lot of. It was a really good conversation about the subject, and I think it's an interesting. I can understand why people hate philosophy. Honestly, I can. But I think once you start to dive into it, and yeah, there's some times where I'm like, why am I reading this? But other times it's actually
expands your mind.
What's that?
It expands your mind.
Yeah, expands your mind.
Beyond your own limited thoughts. And all of us, our minds are limited.
Yeah. And I think one person said it very well when he said, sometimes philosophy will just teach us what we know, but it will articulate it more coherently than what we've been able to do before.
I like that.
Yeah, and I think that's what I've really gained out of just starting to look into philosophy more is, yeah, maybe I already knew that, but it presented it in a more articulate, more coherent way than I've ever heard it before. And that's what I think is cool, because it was maybe only a brief mention of religion in this talk, but it was mostly about a subject that people don't normally think about or have brushed off.
But do you think that philosophy has advanced over the years? Do you think that the modern philosophers are as good as the older philosophers?
Well, yes and no. There have been...
He's a politician. Oh, he should be.
in some sense, we have a lot of modern pseudo-philosophers. Like, just as you have scientists and pseudoscience, there are pseudo-philosophers who really abuse what philosophy is. But really, I mean, actually one thing mentioned in the speech are some of the advancements in philosophy. Like, you could say atheism, the rise of atheism is an advancement in philosophy.
Yeah, okay.
Or the advancement of consequentialism, which is basing your morality on the consequences rather than authoritative dogma. That's something that has been progressed more and more. There was a couple of other things. Like, for example, I think the best way to put it is, like science, the methods for good science existed 2,000 years ago. Just not everybody used them. And in the scientific revolution, what they finally started to put aside all the bad methods, and the good methods became more popular. Whereas, you know, sort of the same thing's happening in philosophy, where bad philosophies are more and more being put aside, people are being more educated about it. And more and more better philosophies are taking their places. And it's important to note that philosophy is many things. It's science, well, actually what they call physics, which in the old days is how they actually term science. You have metaphysics, which is what you do after the science. And I mean, he gives a lot of examples of this, where it's, science can only take you so far. You know, what you do with the science is philosophy, essentially. Where
to a certain extent, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, and then, you know, things like aesthetics or politics or ethics, that's all lumped together under your philosophy. So it's hard to talk about philosophy as a thing. Sometimes it's more of a collection of things. But I mean, anyway, that's what I like about these events, is they cover a variety of topics to get you thinking about different things. You know, it's sometimes, I mean, yeah, we criticize religion a lot, but sometimes we want to do more than that. We want to, you know, I think we want to be more than that.
Well, our prime goal is to make people think outside of the box, and religion is a box that they have. People have not necessarily climbed into themselves, but they have allowed themselves to be put into that box, picked up by the scruff of the neck when they were young, and put into the box, and then they couldn't get out, you know, or they didn't want to get out.
But yeah, that's some of the other speeches they did at that conference was P.Z. Myers did a talk on the Cambrian explosion, really going through like some of the common objections and criticisms of it.
Yeah, that was not a terrorist event, by the way.
No, he was talking about, you know, like before how there were a lot of more phyla to appear in that era than any other. But then he kind of explains why that doesn't really mean anything, and it was really good talk, explaining a lot of the different things about it. And then Aaron Ra did a speech about the evolution of dinosaurs to birds, and some of the misconceptions. You know, for example, a lot of people seem to still think that pterodactyls are dinosaurs, which they are not, and really explaining why that is. Now, in that one, he actually was recovering from illness and kind of garbled the speech a little bit. He actually posted a revision to that speech on his personal channel. Now that's Aaron Ra, ARONRA. And I would actually check out his channel as well. He's given a lot of very good speeches. So, I mean, that's the thing. These conferences are a lot of fun to go to, but if you can't make it out to one, I would definitely, YouTube is the next best thing. You can find all kinds of great information, not just about, you know, not just about atheism, but about all sorts of other subjects.
Well, also, you can get a flavor for it. Like if you have to travel any distance to get to one of the conferences. Well, obviously, you don't want to spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars to go out there. And then when you get out there, you're going, oh, this isn't what I thought. I'm bored to death. But you tune into YouTube and you start looking at all the speeches that are there, going, oh, that's interesting. I wish I was there so I could raise my hand and ask a question. And I think you're probably more likely to go to future events than if you didn't watch anything on YouTube. Yeah, and
actually that's really, I had a great time at the last one because I already was well acquainted with all of these speakers, even though I'd never met them before in person. By the time I got to the conference, I was already very well acquainted with all of these speakers. I knew their style, I knew their personalities, I knew what they were talking about. And, I got to eat breakfast with Seth Andrews a couple times, which was a lot of fun. I talked to David Silverman a bit and J.T. Eberhard. Some of the bigger faces you'll see. And I was able to talk to them because I was able to go on YouTube and really get to know them, which is part of the reason. Like I really want to, with all these authors coming to this year's book conference, I definitely want to check out all of their books before I go.
Well, the thing is about these people is that they are very human. They're very open and. Even if you think, oh, I'm going there, I'm a nobody, and everything, they probably won't want to talk to me. You get someone like Dave Silverman. You go, oh, well, hi, Dave. Hey, I'm from Yama, Washington, there, and he talks to you like you're an old friend, and which really makes you feel good, and you're really glad that you went to.
Well, and it also does something for them too, because they want to know that they're making a difference. They're out here to make a difference. Like you were showing with David Silverman, watching some of his speeches is what really encouraged me to come out of the closet. And I went up there and told him that, and he seemed really grateful. I told him that, just because that's what he wants. That's what he's trying to accomplish.
Yes.
And he wants to know, he's doing. Is he doing
it right? Yeah. And he evidently, yes. Because he dragged you out kicking and screaming. No, I don't want to go.
Not necessarily kicking and screaming, but it definitely had some advice on how to do it right, which is what really helped.
And survive once you get out on it, because there will be people that are against you. I mean, not necessarily want to go and beat you up, but people can be very, very snobbish. And they can have their nose so far in the air that they actually block out the sun, and he teaches you, Dave does, he teaches you how to deal with these kind of people once you come out of the closet, and to actually respond to these people, which I think is a great gift to be given to someone.
Yeah, and if you're out of the closet, I would definitely encourage you to come out to some of our other events that will be happening throughout 2014. All over the state, we do a lot of tabling. We have a lot of tables at different street fairs or festivities throughout the mid-state. Our first will be the Old York Street Fair on Mother's Day. But we have at least half a dozen from Lancaster Pride Fest, Harrisburg Pride Fest. I think we even marched in the Annville Memorial Day parade last year.
Yeah, and previous years as well. We do a lot of marches in there with our banners, and we've done St. Patrick's Day.
St. Patrick's Day
events, and. A lot of people don't know that we're here. I mean, even though we've got this TV program on, so many people are not aware that we're here. And then they see us out with our banner, and they're amazed. Like, I didn't know there were people like you in this area. Well, you know, you kind of wonder, you know, gee, how should I take that?
Right.
People like you, but you can tell by the smile on their face that they really are glad to see you.
Yeah, and not only see us, but see us that, you know, we're out there standing, like, we're holding up a flag saying what we are. We're not embarrassed about it. We're not trying to hide it. You know, there's no reason to hide it anymore.
Yeah.
So, I mean, of course, we'll have, you know, people arguing with us or engaging, but, you know, a conversation can be good. And really sometimes, you know, for me personally, it was when people actually made me confront my own doubts and disbelief, is that I was able to finally let them go.
And also your own beliefs, as well as disbeliefs.
Right.
Sort of reinforce them. And, you know, our first show is it is kind of a show, but the first event is, as we said, on Mother's Day in York. And we usually, in quite a few of the past events, we've been on the corner of Beaver Street and West Market Street, and believe me when I say you can't miss us. We got a big banner up, and we got a booth there with bumper stickers and pins and everything that we sell. And you can drop by, say hello to us. We have various atheists and agnostics and non-believers of all kinds at the booth, that we're only too pleased to discuss anything that you have on your mind, any doubts, or if you know, you want to tell us that we're going to hell, well, you better get in line, because we've been told that 1,000 times before, but evidently it's a very slow trip, because we're still here, and my toes have not been burned yet. So, but there's still hope, you know, for the Christians.
Yeah. But in our last couple of minutes here, I'd like to kind of finish up what other major events coming up this year. I was kind of looking over the list of books coming up this year, see if there was any major new publications for atheist material. I kind of like keeping up to date on, you know, maybe what's going on or what some of these people have to say. The only major book I could confirm was I, Atheist by David Silverman.
On the screen.
As you can see, that's what's the cover of the book. It's due out on March 10th, so only a couple of months, 2 months from now, almost 2 months from today. I don't know, it's the 14th. But yeah, less than 2 months away. And it's going to be really his, from what I understand, it's going to be his formal defense of being a firebrand atheist. You know, someone, you know, he's put up a lot of billboards, a lot of, you know, done a lot of, you know, work like that, you know, getting the message of atheist out, that, you know, he's taken a lot of criticism for it. So this, you know, and he's given speech after speech. I've seen on quite a few speeches on YouTube defending it, showing how it's helping the movement, how it's, you know, it's helping their cause. And I think this book is really just going to be a lot about his formal defense of it. And I mean, I think it really does do a lot of good to at least, you know, be out, be visible, and, you know, not being afraid to speak your mind.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, he's not a person that when you talk about a firebrand atheism, that doesn't really mean that, you know, you want to go out and be confrontational, physically confrontational with people. He likes to be confrontational with the written word and with speeches, and he doesn't really go out there with the intent of making anyone angry, but he's out there letting people know what he thinks and what many atheists will say.
Right. But and I think the last major event that I can see is on February 4th is going to be the debate between Bill Nye the Science Guy and Ken Ham at the Creation Museum. which has a lot of people wondering just what is Bill Nye thinking. I don't, like, a lot of people are just sitting there wondering, does he know what he's getting himself into?
Now, but wait a minute. There are a number of creation museums throughout the country. What one are you talking about?
I'm talking about the main one in Kentucky that was part of Answers in Genesis.
Yeah.
It's the one by Ken Ham, sponsored by that. Now, supposedly it will be live streamed over the internet as well. Unfortunately, I'm not confident that that's actually going to happen, because they actually put on the website that they may opt out of it. And they've already started discussing refunds information for anyone who's. It's going to be. I think it's going to be $5 if you want to watch it over the internet.
Is it actually going to be down at that facility?
Yeah, it's going
in that facility.
In the Creation Museum, which is why.
Boy, talk about home court advantage.
Yeah, that's what they're saying, and apparently I've heard. I don't know if this is true or not, but they surveyed a couple of people.
Like asking.
No, they've asked a few people about. Are you supportive of Ken Ham or Bill Nye? And they claimed it was about to make fair seating, and then somebody said they were against Ken Ham, and they got a message saying that their ticket will be refunded. So, and that on top of possibility of opting out of the live stream has me really worried. That. You hate to call them liars so outright, but I've seen it too many times. Like, I know at least this has happened a couple of times with Eric Hovind and Ray Comfort, where they filmed the scientist and then carefully edited the video later. And it's
sort of like Fox News.
Yeah. Actually,
the national Fox.
Yeah, I don't want to single out creationists for this either, because I've seen it happen so many times. But yeah, I think the main point is not the debate that they're worried about, because I've seen Bill Nye a few times be able to handle himself against harsh critics. But the fact that it's in the Creation Museum is really. Well, also you have to understand how much money this is bringing into the Creation Museum. And that's what really bothers a lot of people. But now a lot of people, I've heard, want Bill Nye just to ignore Ken Ham. But when you still have at least 33 to 42% of the population still believing in creationism, you can't ignore it.
No, it won't go away.
Yeah, ever. That's the thing. It's like, I don't, like, even if it's ridiculous, if enough people believe it, you have to confront it.
Well, it's a believe just in case.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they say, well, okay, I'm not sure if I really do believe it, but I'll say that I believe it just in case I don't get caught flat-footed if Armageddon comes.
Well, Aaron Ra put out a series called The Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism, and number one on his list was the idea that you cannot accept evolution and still believe in God. Is one of the biggest falsehoods there is out there, because there are many of the biggest proponents of evolution today are still Christian, like Kenneth Miller or Robert T. Bockert, or a lot of people who are Christian and accept evolution, and that's the big problem, is people don't realize that. So I mean, even Pascal's wager doesn't apply to that.
Let me tell you something, and it's true. I remember my early education was actually in England, okay, before I moved out. But when I first went to school there was no confrontation between creationism, evolution, and religion. We were sort of taught there that a God created the universe, and evolution was the way that he did it.
Yeah,
so
actually,
it went hand in hand. I can't believe all the
Actually, like one thing I saw Aaron Ross said in a video was, he goes, talked about that false dichotomy, and he goes, some people accept, so there are atheists who accept evolution but not abiogenesis and the Big Bang. There are a lot of scientists do accept both of those but not God. Some people accept all three. All of these beliefs can be very much independent of each other, which is why this really isn't, as he said, as Aaron Robb put it so good, he's like, this supposed controversy never really was about whether or not there is a God. It really isn't. So, but I think the problem with the debate between creationism and evolution is how much creationists will move the goalposts, like as far as what they're willing to accept. For example, there's a great video on YouTube called on the Potholder 54 channel, who's a scientist who's done a lot to make it more palatable. He ridiculed Kent Hovind a lot. It was hilarious to watch. But he showed this one video where Kent Hovind actually admitted speciation happens. And talked about the different pieces of speciation, even answers in Genesis that admits it happens. And they're talking about how things can be the same kind, and these two things are the same kind. And then the guy posts like a chimpanzee next to a human and goes, okay, tell me why that's not the same kind, by the same definitions.
But the biggest problem with creationism and an evolution that if the people that support creationism admit that there's only just one flaw in their argument, then they kiss everything else goodbye. It's like people saying that, okay, there are errors in the Bible, there are conflicts in the Bible. But no. Well, no, of course they can't admit that, because the whole house of cards just falls if you admit to only one error. So you've got to just say no. God is yes. God.
Well, and I think another part of it is they think a new species has to be so different from its ancestor that you can't tell they're related.
And it has to be almost instantaneous. And,
Or it has to be like, the part they don't understand is when you start with the tree of life, like you have like for example, P.Z. Myers was talking about all the new phylas emerging. But phyla only it makes sense when you're talking about a modern day animal. Like you can tell, like say a horse is different from a primate or something. But where the 2 points diverge, it started with two different species. Which I think is, if people understood that much, they'd understood evolution perfectly.
Yeah, but would they really want to?
Yeah, that's the other part. I think it's when I really started learning about phylogeny is when I started to really understand evolution, because once you understand how speciation works, and when you start to rip down the creationist straw man, you realize that it's not really that complicated a thing.
One of the biggest problems is that people they cannot imagine infinite numbers. They no way that they can imagine a Googleplex. Okay, and you start talking to them about slow changes over billions of years. They just can't fathom it. So you're saying that things just changed like that, and you go, oh hell no. It changed over a long period of time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we are finally winding down for tonight. Be sure to check our screen, and you see we've got the next program on the 28th, Tuesday. And please join us. And once again, we are the Free Thought Forum, and we're happy that you tuned in. Say goodbye, Jay.